This year, 83 the game got a surprise update. The studio had secured actual funding, the game was back in development, and they were going to release into early access within a year. For those of us who were fans of the Red Orchestra and Rising Storm series, this was all incredible to hear, but that wasn't all. The devs also announced that they were going to do everything in Unreal Engine 5. Yes, a game that was essentially stuck in game dev purgatory for 6 years was now going to overhaul the entire thing from the ground up with the most modern engine available. Now, when I say Unreal Engine 5 and tactical shooter in the same sentence, that scares most people. Unreal Engine 5 looks great, but it's always about optimization. Am I going to be able to actually play this game, or do I need to spend thousands of dollars just to get 60 FPS? UE5 is one of the most accessible game engines out on the market right now, and with that, we see a lot of early access titles that get pushed out with lots of problems. The games might look great, but they usually have low FPS and just a lot of performance problems. However, that's not necessarily a UE5 problem, that's a development problem. And I was able to sit down with the CEO of Blue Dot Games, Tony Gilham, their technical artist, Anthony Carmona, and the game's lead programmer, Sam McKay, and we just talked game dev for about an hour. Unreal Engine 5 has an incredible amount of potential behind it, but that's only if the devs really figure out the details, and in this interview, we got the details. From code and graphical optimization to improving network and server performance, and even some insight on the community-first mentality when it comes to supporting community-made content, we talked about everything. So as someone who's not just interested at 83 because it's a new tactical shooter, but also someone who's a huge fan of the Rising Storm and Red Orchestra series, and as someone who just loves to hear devs talk about the games they're building, I absolutely love the chance to sit down and talk with Tony, Anthony, and Sam, and I think you guys will too. Thanks again to Blue Dot Games for taking the time to chat, and enjoy the interview. So before we dive into Unreal Engine 5 and some of the work you guys are doing on the game, first, if you can do maybe a quick introduction, name what you're doing with the project, and how long you've been in game dev.
Okay, I'll start off. I'm Tony Gilham. I am the CEO of Blue Dot Games, the co-founder of Blue Dot. And I have been working on games like this since Darkest Hour mod for Red Orchestra in 2007, which is one for the archives there, if anyone can remember that. And we've got with us today, because we're talking about optimization, both of graphics and of network server CPU optimization. So we've got Anthony Carmona, who is our technical artist, and we have got Sam McKay, who is our lead programmer. And yeah, sorry, I just introduced you guys for you, but
it's fine with me. So 83, I joined this year at the beginning of the year, and I've been working in the industry for the last 12 years with some titles that you may know, Call of Duty Black Ops 4, Modern
little
Warfare
titles
2
like
Remastered.
that, yeah.
A little bit. Modern Warfare 2 Remastered, and then I worked with different clients over the years. I worked with Tencent, I worked with Epic Games, all the sorts.
Yeah, I'm Sam. I'm the lead programmer, and I have been working with Blue Dot since sort of mid-April this year, and I've been in games for just coming up on 10 years now. Not a huge amount of releases to my name because it's been a lot of AAA long projects that they don't always come out. But yeah, previously with Ubisoft and did quite a lot of mobile games with Pixel Toys.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you guys for taking the time to talk UE5 and game dev. So first off, before we get into maybe the more detailed analysis of what you guys are physically doing in UE5 with 83, why did you guys even pick Unreal Engine 5? There's a big maybe divide in the community. Whenever someone sees a UE5 game, they have this stereotype of, man, it's not going to be optimized, or it's going to, cause my computer to catch on fire. So when you're looking at game engines for when you're developing or initially trying to develop 83, what really stuck out with UE5 that made you say, yep, we're going to do it?
Yeah, if I could speak to that. Essentially, as you probably know, 83 was considered dead for a while when Antimatter Games got shuttered. And so we picked it up but we didn't have any funding, so we were a very small team and we were just kind of tinkering with it. But one of the questions that we had to ask ourselves is, what are we going to do to make us stand out? What are we going to do so that we can have a kind of USP compared to titles like, I don't know, like Hell Let Loose or Squad? So we thought, well, none of those titles, way back then, none of those titles were on Unreal Engine 5, so let's make the move over to that. Then, of course, Squad announced that they were going to move to Unreal Engine 5, and we were like, no, that was a shame. But by that point, we committed. And a lot of the content that we actually picked up, because we did a deal with ENAC Global 7, the parent of Antimatter Games, to pick up the IP and the content and the social media channels and all that. So, you know, a lot of the stuff was already in Unreal Engine 5. And we kind of thought, well, there you go. Some of the stuff is already there. How hard can it be? And then we hired Anthony, and we found out exactly how hard it can be.
Since it has been in development for a while now, there's a lot of stuff that has been accumulated over time by the different teams that have worked on it. And right now, most of the job that we are making in the background is to rationalize the content that we have, declutter most of the content, declutter the maps, and basically update the assets that we currently have into a Unreal Engine 5 compliant way. Because most of the issues that people meet when they switch to Unreal 5 is that they keep on working the same way that they did in Unreal Engine 4. And doesn't really work. That doesn't really work because Unreal Engine 5 is a completely different beast in terms of technology, in terms of how you author your environments, how you author your models and your textures. It is day and night. So part of my job is to educate the team into how to work with Unreal Engine 5, because there's a lot of very ingrained customs, I'd say, about making game dev with Unreal Engine 4 that has to be unlearned basically when you switch to Unreal Engine 5.
A lot of developers who've made the move have found that they have to deal with a huge amount of tech debt. So you take a look at the example of Squad, for example. You know, they had an absolute buttload of content there. And when they said they were going to move to Unreal Engine 5, I was like, yeah, good luck with that. That is a huge task. You know, it's just because they've already got so much content. In a way, we're kind of at a slight advantage there because we don't have so much content that we have to swap over. I mean, admittedly, we've probably got a far smaller team. But yeah, having somebody like Anthony come in and say, yeah, guys, you're doing it all wrong. You're going to have to stop now, listen to me and start again. It was kind of necessary, really. And everybody, Anthony doesn't mind. If everybody didn't hate him when he came into the project, he wouldn't have been doing his job. So, you know, he's done a good job. I think we're all converted now. And you know, we've got an entirely new kind of workflow to deal with nanites, to deal with Lumen, to deal with rationalizing the sort of master materials, etc., etc. There was a lot of stuff there, which was kind of symptomatic of, I guess you could say, symptomatic of churn. There were lots of different hands on the project back when it was with Antimatter Games. And so, you know, there were lots of different ways of things were being done. And it's the job of somebody like Anthony, and for that matter, Sam, to come in and say, right, well, look, just stop doing that right now. We've all got to do it together. We've all got to do it the one way, and we've got to make sure we stick to that because, you know, we're on a tight timeline. We're looking for early access at the end of this year, and that's you know, that's going to require a lot of discipline. That's going to require a lot of sticking to the plans that these guys have laid out.
So you brought up Squad, and one thing that, you know, I'm sure you guys are following Squad's development and transition to UE5 pretty closely. But, you know, one thing, they had a game now, I think it's almost 11 years into development and making it and adding on to it. And there's as you mentioned, a lot of tech debt that can come with an older game like that. So when Anthony comes in, do you guys pretty much just level everything, start from square one, and say, you know what, I know it's going to be painful now, but if we don't reset our workflow, if we don't all learn best practices, a year from now, whether it's going to be in sales or customer experience or, you know, even hurting ourselves, like, we're going to pay for it. Like, you just kind of have to clean slate it, reset, or something like that?
I wouldn't say we chucked everything away, but certainly we had to retool everything to fit into the new kind of way of doing things. That's pretty much right. Yeah, Anthony. I mean, tell me you're not going to throw it away.
I offered the solution, of throwing everything away, but no. We are the way we are doing things is we are trying to rationalize the way we work. So I'm the only tech artist on this. So I'm only one man. So what I do is that I work on aspects one after the other. So it's like a series of domino that I can take down. At first, it's a bit messy, and then, you know, I start working on the materials, and then I start working on the terrains, and then I start working on the assets, and so on and so forth. It's a gradual process, but at the end of the day, with enough discipline from the artist, it works. It can get there. It's just a bit more painful than just, you know, stopping the full production for 3 months for me, but it's less painful for the rest of the team, because basically they wouldn't be doing nothing for 3 weeks or for 3 months.
Maybe if we can then bring up the example, because you brought up Nanite and, you know, Lumen and all these. Obviously, they're not buzzwords; they're very real things. But when people who aren't in game dev and you know, just gamers, they hear Nanite, half of the people say this is exciting. The other half say, all right, I need to spend $3,000 to buy a new computer. So maybe if you can explain a little bit how y'all are approaching Nanite and these types of tools that can make games look really good, but can also scare people a little bit.
The philosophy behind Nanite is that you pay a slight overhead when you're enabling the feature, but then you basically don't pay any cost at all while you're using the feature. In the past, you would have a linear cost to the more geometry that you would have inside of a scene, for instance. And now with Nanite, you don't have that. You just pay a flat fee, let's say, and then it's, you know, like straight from that, the same cost for everything. Most of the issues that stem with Unreal Engine 5 projects at the moment is just a misunderstanding of how the technology works. And you end up with having a half measure kind of thing with the project. You have some things that are using Nanite, other things that are not using Nanite. Or one of the biggest offenders, for instance, is foliage. The old way that we were making foliage was with billboards. So you would have you know, like a branch, and that would be like a simple texture on a flat plane, and you would have something called a mask cutout that would cut out the around the foliage. It's just, this is an alpha, this is not an alpha, and what is not an alpha is not seen. What is an alpha is not seen. What is not an alpha is seen. Nanite has a very specific way of handling transparency. So it doesn't really handle transparent meshes in the sense of transparency, like a gradient of transparency. It's like on or off. That's okay, that we can manage. So we could always make trees. But the thing is, any pixel that is not seen on a tree still costs the same as a pixel that is seen. So it's like, we, in that regard, it is better for us to just go with full geometry for trees. So we would have a tree that's like 1 million or 2 million triangles, but that's fine because Nanite can handle it.
We're aiming at 40 versus 40 players, probably more actually, and that again, you know, it's a case of how can we do that without the server catching fire, and we made quite a lot of strides, a lot of progress there after the move to Unreal Engine 5. When we first started working on this project over a year ago, we couldn't get more than 20 versus 20 on a server without there being immense rubber banding, people getting really unsatisfactory experiences, and essentially it was literally unplayable.
And was that on just a basic map, or because in the trailer we see the forest, and was that just even on with pretty basics going on? 20 on 20 was already struggling.
Yeah, that was quite aside from the graphical performance. I mean, the forest looked quite pretty, and this was the original trailer we did a while back.
Oh yes,
that was pre-optimization, so a lot of it was pre-rendered.
Okay.
In sequencer. A lot of the stuff we're getting now is actually okay because we're reaching the point now where it is optimized enough. But we were very proud of the kind of progress that we made in terms of getting it from 20 versus 20 up to actually reaching our goal of 40 versus 40. And a lot of that is down to the use of Iris, which is something that was originally put out with Fortnite. And actually, you know what? I'm talking about programming stuff. Sam, you know more about Iris than me. What's it all about?
Iris is sort of born out of Epic's experience with Fortnite, so it takes on a lot of the learnings that they have from that, and really it's designed to help you run with high density servers, removing some of the anti patterns in how people are programming to sort of force you to program in a way that is going to help you scale, because a lot of the times you're tripping yourself up. And it does a lot of it by kind of sharing out workloads for certain objects. It tries to make sure that the replication kind of thread on the CPU and the game thread are relatively separate so that you can really drill down into where the problems are. It's other huge bonuses. It's important for a small studio like us, ultimately, is it helps to lower our server costs as well, because the more we can optimize that server, the more instances we could run on a physical machine, and we get more bang for our buck, and it's a better experience for everyone because we can have more servers running.
So it started with we're struggling on 20, and then Sam comes in. You guys can now get up to 40 on the side, and now you guys are 80 in total. So 80 in total. So is there? You said would like to go more. Is there like a stretch goal? Hey, we're not going to promise this at all, because I know everyone wants games to be as big as possible, but and sometimes it's like 83 might be super fun with 128, but realistically maybe the gameplay loop is actually better at 80. So where are you guys at in terms of player numbers? What's reasonable, and then what's technically possible?
Right. Well, I mean, technically possible. What if you take a look at some of the graphics that we've given you there, and maybe they can go up on the screen? What we're doing is we're shaving off milliseconds all the time. We've got one programmer who is that's his job. Basically, he's shaving off milliseconds, even microseconds here and there, all over the place. Now, what can we commit to? I think that the game itself, it's the maps aren't going to be quite as big as, like, for example, Squad or something like that. One of the kind of core our core ethos, if you like, is that we want to have half-hour rounds, 30 to 40-minute rounds. We don't, the kind of game where you might spend an afternoon planning your moves, etc., with your buddies. That's fine, but that's not us. We believe that we're not just competing for players' money, although obviously as a game studio we are doing that, but we're also competing for their time, and that's quite a valuable commodity for a lot of players. So the map sizes are kind of tuned, and we're going through this right now, tuning the map size so that 40 versus 40 works. Now, if we find that we can actually do a bit more, then I would imagine that kind of extra overhead is going to be going more to getting the vehicles working correctly, getting various other features in, like airstrikes, that kind of thing. But
that's something I want to touch on actually. Is like shaving off those milliseconds. Like with a game like ours, a lot of the cost of having players is obviously scaling with those players. Like you've got 5-10 players on, then okay, you could probably afford 800 microseconds a player or something in that ballpark. But as soon as you're pushing to 80, you've got to get that per player cost down as low as you possibly can. And Tony, you touched on it earlier. We have much smaller maps than a few of our competitors. And as much as that might sound like a benefit to us, from the network optimization point of view, it's actually a bit of a cost, because suddenly your player density is so much higher. So the chance of you seeing more players in an area and needing to know about what they're all doing, it's just increased. Whereas on a larger map, you don't need to care what's happening on the other side of the map. So we don't need that data going to those players. So it all presents all these different challenges. So we're quite regularly now having to just gather data from large playtests with all our playtest community and sort of look at each frame time and say, where can we shave off the next win? Because sort of speculatively optimizing random areas of the game is only going to get you so far.
Yep.
It really needs to be a very data-driven process and sort of looking, well, that's where the cost is, that's where we've got to focus. And a lot of the time it's coming down to those per player costs.
When you have a game like this, you have gamers that have all different types of systems. And the biggest thing is that you want to give everyone the same fun experience. And when you're having a game that is detailed, and especially in UE5, when you can make it look so good. What's, I guess, your design and game philosophy when it comes to a low-end graphics experience to a high-end graphics experience? Because we've talked about Squad a couple times today, and one thing that was a big sticking point in the community for a couple of years is that you could actually lower your graphic settings, and you don't have shadows, you don't have certain foliage, your experience is now maybe a little bit more like Counter-Strike than a tactical shooter. So when you're looking at this type of stuff, are you also taking these things into consideration, certain not low fidelity, but more performant low-end graphics to high-end graphics, so everyone has the same fun experience no matter what system they have?
It is a tricky one. I mean, we did a survey when we first started out with our community, and we found quite a surprising number of 10 series NVIDIA cards.
They're out there. They really are.
Yeah, really. You think, wow, you're into your games, but you've got a 1070. How does that work? The answer is, frankly, with the best will in the world, not great. You need to be really careful, though, about switching off vegetation, etc., because it brings about the possibility of hacking. You can see players that can't see you because they've got grass in front of their face. You haven't. So that's something that needs to be done very carefully. Other than that, I don't know if Anthony, have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, basically in terms of graphics, we can try to make sure that a lot of things are not turned off on the lower end. So it's all about testing, because you will have some far clipping that happens sooner on the lower GPU and stuff like this. It's a whole lot of testing. So as we will develop the maps, we will also have to be careful of these things. For instance, if you zoom in at a far distance with a low graphic settings, you've got to be careful that the tree is still there. Or if you're hiding in a bush, you have to be careful that the guy, like with his goggles, is looking at you and it still doesn't see you. So it's more about testing and making sure that the rendering is solid when it comes to all different types of graphics. Yeah, that's
and specifically anti-aliasing settings as well. They're a bit of a nightmare, aren't they?
Love TSR. I mean, TSR is great, but the implementation of TAA is not awesome. Could be better.
Yeah, there's a lot of mucking about going on around anti-aliasing that all needs to be considered as well. What's the one we don't like, Anthony?
Anti-aliasing, you mean?
Yeah. What's the one? TAA or TSR?
TAA. I mean, TSR is it's an implementation of TAA with super sampling.
Yeah, there's I do know with Squad they have, as you mentioned, the scope differences. You can actually have separate AA settings for your picture-in-picture optics and things like that. And it's on one hand it can be very immersive. On another hand, sometimes you lose so much FPS. Some things look funky. It can be very immersion breaking, going from the ADS to not ADS and things like that. So it's definitely I'm interested to see what y'all end up implementing or at least working, because I'm sure this is, even with Squad that's been officially out now for 5 years, they're always changing things. And I'm guessing in this first, whenever y'all do release into early access, these are the type of things that you really, I mean, you can get certain amount of data from testing, but you can't get everything unless you literally give it to everyone and see what breaks and what works and what doesn't.
Yeah, I mean, we're expecting I mean, we've got about, well, on the books we've probably got about 1,000 alpha testers, but as you can imagine, a lot of the people get the Steam key, play it a couple of times, and go, "Yep, that's it, I've done my bit." And so, but we got a regular crew, a couple hundred, and that's definitely helping us, you know, to fill up the servers when we do our regular play tests, and we do get feedback from them after each play test. There is a questionnaire that we ask them to fill out. Currently, it's mostly about gameplay, although we do have methods of grabbing traces from people's performance. You know, we can ask them to go on a map, type in a command, and it will basically take a look at graphic performance at a bunch of key spectator cameras around the map. So, you know, that's information that we are gathering. I expect that when we enter into closed and open beta, that's where we're going to be really drilling down on some of the finer differences, like how do you find the anti-aliasing and the scopes, etc., etc. It certainly is something that's let's put it this way, it's on our radar.
We see in the trailer is a lot of detail in the map, and then add in things like explosions. You know, I don't know if there is going to be any type of destruction, but at least destroying vehicles or, you know, things, grenades. You mentioned airstrikes, things like that. Maybe can you speak a little bit on the effects that people may expect to see? And, you know, the biggest concern is I like my games to look beautiful and pretty, right? Every aspect of it, from the foliage to the explosion, it needs to look good. But if it looks good and my computer freezes for like 5 seconds, that's not worth it, right? So are y'all also trying to focus on these types of particle effects and other things that visually can cause a lot of these problems?
Yeah, well, I'm not going to say too much. I'm not going to commit to too much here, because our producer will probably murder me if I say too much. Certainly, destruction has to exist in some way. That's an absolute given. You know, what you can't have is a tank bouncing off a barbed wire fence. What you can't have is like an artillery strike hitting, you know, say some wooden fences or something like that, and nothing happening. That's not acceptable. Now, there are a variety of ways of handling the destruction. I mean, the simplest way, obviously, is the tank hits a fence, the fence disappears. That's simple. That's very easy. There's hardly any overhead on that at all. The next level might be it hits the fence tips over, flattened into the ground. One of the things that Antimatter Games were looking at is the use of something called vertex animated textures, which, if you like, a kind of pre-recording of destruction, a pre-recording of, say, a watchtower flying into pieces everywhere. Now, that is relatively light, in the sense that all you have to do is tell each of the clients, run the recording. You don't actually have to send across data about where all the individual bits of debris go. So that's actually in that respect, that's a reasonably optimized way of handling destruction of big objects, of kind of impressive looking objects that you might want to get destroyed. It takes a lot of work to make these, though. So if we do that, it's only going to really be for kind of hero assets where, you know, it matters. So it's a bit early for us to say exactly what we're going to commit to in terms of destruction. Certainly, destruction has to play a part. I'm sure you remember, what was it, Battlefield 2, Battlefield Bad Company, where everything was destructible, and I had a blast playing that game multiplayer. The thing is that people were just running around blowing up every building they can see. They weren't even really they weren't concentrating on shooting each other. It's like, forget the enemy, get that building, you know, that's in the way. So I'm certainly not going to commit to that, particularly as our environment artists have spent so much time and care building all this stuff. We don't want a bunch of yahoos running around just destroying all their work just for giggles. So, that's something, again, it's something that we have to look at. It's something that we have to balance against the performance, because it's very important for us that that the servers run well, that the servers are not expensive. Community for us is a really, really big part. Red Orchestra, Rising Storm 2, community servers were the lifeblood of those games. And so we've recently, what was it, Sam? When we decided to move to Linux, what was the performance gain there? It was pretty good, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was decent. We got about a 15% performance bump by moving over to Linux, which is great, and it's better for us as well because the servers are cheaper to run. There's no Windows licensing, and it's just been an all-round nice game for us.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And if we can pass on those gains to the community as well, to the guys that like the clanners, the realism units, etc., that want to run their own community server, then great, let's do that. Let's make it as easy an entry for them as possible, because one of the things that I really liked about what happened with the Red Orchestra, the Rising Storm franchise, is the community servers were test beds for maps, for custom maps. And although we're not going to be able to hand out an SDK, we're certainly committing to sometime, definitely after early access, to handing out a level editor.
Okay.
Because we want to encourage these mappers, and that's a win-win really, because the mappers get a chance to work with the tools. They get a chance to use our, we've got modular kits now for all of our buildings, so that it doesn't look so kind of cookie cutter when they just kit bash our stuff. That was kind of one of the informing principles for us when we're developing environmental assets, is can these be reused smartly by community mappers? So it is a win-win. They develop the maps, they get play tested on the community servers. Obviously we have to whitelist them, check that check that there's nothing dodgy going on the server, and we just get great new map ideas that maybe we haven't thought of. And then we do, like Tripwire did with the Red Orchestra Rising Storm franchises, you bring them in, you church them up a bit, you polish them off, you give a prize to the winning developer, and you release it. And that's something that we are committing to as well. Every 3 months we're going to be getting a new level out at least.
Awesome.
We're also going to be getting new features, new items about every month or so. So we need to keep that rolling. You need basically, excuse the language, but basically one of the things the players respond to is you keep giving them free shit, essentially.
It's always good to be free, and we've seen with so many games that if you have a community like front and forward mindset when it comes to game dev, as you said with Red Orc is a perfect example. Even you mentioned Battlefield earlier. Some of the servers from these older games, no matter what game it is, it's only alive because of server communities. And so hearing from the get-go that y'all are already planning says, we want your community servers. We want to be able to give a map editor so you guys can make your own map content and stuff like that. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that are just saying, thank you. Like, finally, thank you. You hear us.
Well, yeah. I mean, I came from, my first gig was Darkest Hour for Red Orchestra. And I was originally a level designer myself. Admittedly, I was a terrible level designer, which is why you'll not find any of my maps on any servers. But I kind of realized that there's some really talented people whose creativity and technical ability is being encouraged by the release of the SDK, and they're the next generation. They provide you with content. You keep the buzz going. You keep variety in front of players, etc., etc. It really is a win-win.
With that, is there anything that players who are just kind of aware of UE5 and aware of 83, is there anything from either the technical side or programming side that maybe we didn't touch on that you guys are like super excited about, or maybe want to elaborate a little bit more? Is there any other unique aspect of y'all's current development progress that maybe you'd like to explain a bit more?
Oh, when you put it like that,
hey, it's open-ended, hey, right?
Sam, something cool and sexy that we're doing. Come on.
What are we doing? I mean, to many regards, like Iris is one of those things that's quite cool and sexy, because we know that you can get good results from it because it's born from Fortnite, and Fortnite is incredibly smooth. So you can kind of see where the end goal is. And now it's really about bringing everything that's been made over the last 5-6 years up to making sure that they're using Iris, they're using it properly. We've made sure that we care about all of the different concerns. When should that be replicated? How often should that be replicated? It's a huge tuning process to bring up so much code to work exactly the way Iris would like. But we know the benefits are there, and so that's what's interesting for me, is trying to get that balance right and trying to make sure that we have decent enough client prediction that when it is starting to struggle, you're still getting a smooth and consistent experience. And on those slightly lesser, sort of worse connections, for people who don't have amazing internet, we also need really good client prediction. And Iris really helps us focus in on all of those details. And it gives us such minute detail. We can see down to the line of code almost that is causing us to slow down, which is amazing.
Yeah, I think the fact that our lead designer is based in Australia as well really helps us. He's kind of like he's got the min-spec internet connection. He's become, through necessity, he's become incredibly good at getting a good kill to death ratio with 300.
That's impressive. That shows how good you guys have got it. If Aussie gamers can succeed in 83, then you're on the right track.
Well, yeah.
Anything else on Anthony's end that maybe we didn't touch on or like to elaborate on?
Well, there's a couple of things I'm really excited about when it comes to the graphics part. The first one is migrating all the textures to virtual textures. It is a different way of managing the textures inside of the GPU buffer that will allow us to have more materials and stream these in properly. At the end of the day, what it means is that we should have lower requirements for GPUs in terms of memory, rather than what we currently have. And the second one I'm really excited about is the offline tessellation of meshes. So for us, it's super easy to put in place because it's just a one-click solution on the artist side. And it's an actual physical tessellation of the mesh instead of having it done through a shader, which means that it doesn't get killed when you lower the graphics. So you still have some sort of geometry being kept there when you lower your settings. So that's good for avoiding graphics discrepancy between lower end and higher end graphics.
Awesome. And I guess, Tony, anything else from your end?
No, not really. Wishlist the game, I guess, is my only real message there. Yeah, look forward to seeing everybody when we get round to the beta testing. Looking forward to seeing people, seeing their responses, getting the data from them, so that we have the we have the best possible early access we can have. And yeah, very much looking forward to that.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again for spending some time discussing the inner workings of 83 and UE5, and good luck over the next few months.
Yep, watch this space. Watch this space.